All right. Good evening, everyone. We are all set for the live broadcast stream of today's Louis meeting at 6 p.m. on HPA-TV, Comcast, and Frontier Government Channels 96 and 6032. It would also be streamed via hpatv.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV's Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon TV apps. It'll also be rebroadcast and made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. So thank you for joining us. I'll thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. So we have with us Councilman Gale, who is a voting member, Councilwoman Rossetti, who is also a voting member. We have Councilwoman Hercules, and who put in the resolution we'll be discussing today, I believe. We have Corporation Counsel with us, Alexandra Lombardi, HPA-TV. Thank you for broadcasting. And we have my legislative liaison, Lydia Colon. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. So we'll go right into the meeting. And so we have a resolution put in by Councilman Mictum and Councilwoman Hercules, a resolution calling on Corporation Counsel to answer questions regarding the Hartford Police Union contract. So Councilwoman Hercules, I don't know if you want to do like a update as to your thoughts as to why this resolution was put in. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councilman LeBron, and hello to my other council members and Attorney Lombardi, as well as Miss Lydia Colon. And so a lot of the questions sort of have been answered in the previous meetings that we've had, but for purposes of obviously closing the communication loop with respect to this outstanding item, the thinking behind this resolution was really to get some insight into what was negotiated and what were the topic areas that were part of the discussions with respect to the contract, because as we saw, a very large contract resulted in only very few changes, and none of those changes addressed some of what we deem to be very important items related to discipline, police misconduct, transparency, and accountability, which the city has certainly stood apart from many of our municipalities' neighbors and really taken a huge positive stance in that regard. And so it seemed like it would have made sense to use this contract negotiation period as an opportunity to further strengthen those efforts. And the fact that that wasn't done left us a little bit puzzled and wanting to know more about the process. And so that really was the thinking behind being able to inquire with Corporation Counsel what was negotiated, why weren't these topics addressed if they were not, how could we further strengthen our efforts regarding transparency and keeping our community safe and our police officers safe as it relates to the contract. I am not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert on this contract because it is quite dense, but there are several provisions in it that seem to run contradictory or afoul, if I may say, to the notion in the ethos of accountability and transparency. And so it begs the question, why didn't we use this as an opportunity to strengthen those areas that could have been strengthened? And so that really was the question, but I believe Attorney Lombardi did answer that at the OMVGA meeting, in that as we see it, none of those provisions have been changed. Now, I guess another question that it prompts to my mind is, how can we be more proactive in the future into ensuring that our, as city council, concerns with respect to the contract are addressed in that negotiating process instead of being on the back end of it. So if that could possibly be answered for future, to inform future action so that we can make what I think would be some important changes, both communicated and advocated by our neighbors, our constituents that we're accountable to, and us on council. I don't have any issue with the provisions that were agreed on, but I do think it's a shortcoming that a lot of the contract has not been changed, especially as it relates to discipline in police misconduct issues. So.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hercules. I think so. A couple things I'll add on to that. I think from our last Louis meeting, Lydia had requested questions from folks. Attorney Lombardi, did you receive those questions as well?
I did receive those specific questions, and I'm also happy. The one that Councilwoman Hercules just posed wasn't among those questions, but it's a good one, and I'm happy to answer that now as well.
So why don't we give you the floor with coupled with Councilwoman Hercules' question that she just framed now, and then alongside the other questions as well.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman LeBron. So first, I think let's start with the process question that Councilwoman Hercules posed about how council can communicate its priorities with respect to a new negotiated agreement with any of our collective bargaining units. So first, I'll say that the negotiating process is set forth under state law, and state law designates the CEO of the municipality as its chief negotiator. And so in our case, with our strong mayor form of government, the mayor is always going to be the one at the bargaining table, and that's pursuant to state law. But I think there are things that council can know that would be helpful in making sure that it communicates with the mayor in advance of a contract deal about its priorities. And that is that the parties begin negotiating, meaning the union and the city should ideally begin sitting down and starting negotiations for a new collective bargaining agreement 6 months before that agreement expires. And the reason that's important is because, if you notice that it's June 1st and an agreement is expiring on June 30th, and at that point you want to communicate your priorities, many discussions may have already occurred, and it might be too far along in that process to switch gears or put new things on the table. It's a very common ground rule in negotiations for there to be a short period of time to exchange proposals, after which time the parties drill down on those proposals only and really get it into the meat of, what compromises are we going to make? What are we going to accept? What are we going to reject? And so it's just important for council to know that to the extent that it wants to communicate to the mayor about things that it wants to see changed or that should be explored in negotiations, it should do so well in advance of 6 months prior to the expiration of a collective bargaining agreement. Now, again, council's role in the actual negotiation process is also set forth in statute, and it's really just a matter of state law that process, that council's role in the process is limited to a review of an agreement reached and rejection or acceptance of that agreement. So I think really the best thing to do to respond to Councilwoman Hercules' question is really for council to just be reviewing those contracts. And believe me, I know it's not easy. And talking to constituents, figuring out what those priorities are going to be, and making sure to get those to the mayor for consideration prior to the beginning of negotiations for any given contract. So with that, and hopefully that answered your question, Councilwoman Hercules. I'm happy to just kind of go through, read the questions that I received and answer them, Councilman LeBron. Okay. So the first question was whether the city's negotiating team took any steps to renegotiate provisions that allow a member of HPD to set required police staffing levels for special events. The first 4 questions actually begin with, did the city's negotiating team take any steps to? And so I'm just going to start by saying, as I did at the OMBGA meeting on Monday, that the negotiations for the Hartford Police Union tentative agreement did occur off the record under their ground rules. And so because of that, I can't share specifics about the negotiations, but I do think I can talk a little bit about these general topics or subject matter of the various questions, just to give some information to council without talking about the negotiations themselves. This question too was raised specifically at OMBGA. So sorry if I sound like a broken record for those who were at both meetings, but the required police staffing levels for special events is not a mandatory subject of bargaining with the police union. That has, there's an established process within the PD. Chief Thody has staff who are assigned to assessing every special event on a case-by-case basis and making a staffing plan based on a number of considerations, including safety, due to number in attendance, what the event is, et cetera. And he determines the staffing level based off recommendations from his command staff, totally within his discretion. So long answer, that was the long answer. The short answer is this first item is not something that needs to be negotiated. So it was not, it's not something that we would need to discuss with the police union in order to change. The next question is related to allowing certain disciplines to be erased from an officer's record after a defined period of time. There was comments related to this erasure of discipline at the OMBGA meeting on Monday. There weren't questions posed to me, so I didn't speak on it on Monday, but I do think it's worth it to clarify exactly what is in the contract now with respect to discipline and when it is not no longer used for purposes of progression for a particular officer. So under the police union contract as it stands, oral reprimands, written reprimands, and suspensions of 1 to 5 days may no longer be used for purposes of progressive discipline for an officer, so long as they have not reoffended in a certain period of time. And that period of time is longer for in cases of the 1 to 5 day suspensions, and shorter when we're talking about a counseling or an oral reprimand. It does not get erased from their file. It does not get erased as a matter of public record. It just simply means that if they receive a written reprimand for something in the year 2015, and then 3 years later, they do that same thing again. And again, we're talking about lower levels of discipline. So nothing that was so egregious that it warranted a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 day suspension. We're talking about written, oral reprimands and short suspensions. Then we can't say, well, you got a written reprimand for this in the past, so now we're going to go up to a 3-day suspension. So it simply can't be used for purposes of progressive discipline if they haven't reoffended for a certain period of time after receiving that oral, written, or short period of suspension. But again, I wanted to be clear with counsel, nothing gets erased from an officer's record. It's always there and could potentially be considered for purposes of promotion. If they're up for a promotion, it's still there, and it's still something that the chief can consider when deciding whether to promote an individual. So it doesn't go away. The next question was about provisions that allow officers to be paid from accumulated benefit time while serving suspensions. So there is a provision in the police contract that allows an individual who has received a suspension of 1 to 5 days, that instead of sitting home and doing nothing for those 1 to 5 days, they come to work, and instead of being unpaid for 1 to 5 days, they have to burn 1 to 5 days of accrued time. So they lose either vacation leave, earned leave, or some other type of accrued time that they would have been paid out and had the benefit of that payment at some point during their career. So it's, it is, again, only for short suspensions. So we're not talking about egregious misconduct. It's not allowed for anything that would be longer than a 5-day suspension. And the last question in this series was related to steps to negotiate incentives to encourage officers to reside in the city. And I did want to make council aware that as part of the recruitment process, HR creates 2 lists for prospective police officers. One list is for individuals who are Hartford residents, and the chief sees that list first. And a second list is for non-Hartford residents that the chief will see if there's obviously still room in a police class that haven't been filled by Hartford residents. So Hartford residents do receive preference in recruitment. The experience of other municipalities, just kind of anecdotally, as I've talked to other lawyers in this space who have done residency incentives, has been that what happens is the people who have already lived in the city get a bonus for living here, and they would have either way. And people who don't live in the city are not usually incentivized by some kind of a bonus payment to move into the city, because the amount of money that you would need to give someone in order to incentivize them to sell their house, move their family, et cetera, is too large to really be financially feasible. So I just offer that information for council's benefit, but we do give residency preference at recruitment. We don't have any residency incentives otherwise built into the contract. And as I think you all know, it is illegal under state law to require residency of anyone in a bargaining unit. So that's not an option. The last two questions that were sent to me from Ms. Colon were, one was related to employee health insurance. There is no change to health insurance or employee cost shares as part of this agreement. What will happen is that on July 1st of next year, 2023, the PPO will no longer be an option for police. It will just be the high deductible healthcare plan. Though, as I'm sure you all recall, to the extent any of them still have the PPO, they do so at a greater expense to them because it needed to be cost neutral to the city. But that is sunsetting July 1st of next year. There was a question about whether there would be any paid leave in the case of another pandemic or other major health event. There's nothing contemplated in this TA about anything other than the accrued time that they're already afforded, that union members are already afforded, their sick time and their vacation, their earned leave, et cetera, that they already get. And let's all just hope that we don't see another pandemic for a while and this doesn't become an issue. And final question was about retirement packages and whether we've done anything to ensure that officers aren't able to do a ton of overtime to increase their retirement amount. The answer to that question is yes. And we actually did it in the last negotiation with the last contract. We have put a cap on the retirement benefit for new officers. And so that retirement benefit has got progressively stricter to avoid against instances of exactly what was spoken about in this question, where someone just does a lot of OT to pad a pension in the last couple of years of their employ. And that won't be happening in the future for that reason. Those were all the questions I received, Councilman LeBron. I hope I've answered them to everyone's satisfaction.
Thank you. Yes, you did. Thank you, Attorney Lombardi. Councilpersons Rossetti and Councilpersons Gale. Any other questions? Yes, Councilman Gale.
Just to follow up on that retirement, and Alexandra, I don't know if you know this, but as I recall in the last contract, we also increased the first age at which you could collect your pension for new hire. I guess it was for new hires, I think. Is that, am I correct about that?
You're right, Councilman Gale, that we created a new tier in the last contract that had a higher retirement age for the new hires. However, the age 55 was actually for the other tier of the older tier, if you will, of police officers was actually instituted, I believe, under Mayor Segarra. I would have to look back to get an exact year, but the age 55 was in place for a certain tier. And then you're correct that we created a new tier under the last contract that had a higher age of retirement age.
And if I'm not mistaken, these higher ages we are kind of the outlier among other police departments in central Connecticut at this point. In that regard, am I correct about that?
You are correct, Councilman Gale, that was an issue, and council will recall, because it is a matter of record, that there was a different TA initially with the Hartford Police Union that ultimately didn't end up formally in front of council at a meeting because the police union didn't ratify it. A component of that TA was to do something about the retirement age, precisely for the reason that Councilman Gale mentioned. But ultimately, the police union didn't ratify that contract, and so there had to be some give and take to come to a new agreement, and it is not here.
All right, so I guess those are my only questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman Gale. Councilwoman Rossetti, any questions?
No questions, but I would just, my comment on the retirement as far as padding with overtime is, certainly I'm glad that we've found a way to, curtail some of that. But my concern always was also how, and this is just a comment, how viable might not be the right word. When you're in a profession where you carry a firearm and you're working such long hours of overtime, is that really the best thing for someone to be doing too? If you're working, I know if I work long hours and I'm not in the kind of position that an officer is. So I think there's that to be thought of also when we're thinking that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hercules, any added questions?
I have no additional questions,
Sure.
just do appreciate Attorney Lombardi answering the questions, and the fact that this, matter did get back onto the agenda is important. I know sometimes these things can feel a little contentious and like scrutiny, but I appreciate your professionalism and understanding that with this inquiry, it especially when it comes from community and residents, allows more transparency, allows for trust building, it allows for change, and allows for us to get insight that we may be overlooking in what types of changes we need to make with a very important, probably our most vital department in our city. So do appreciate you taking up the matter and answering the questions. And we have our work for the next, time this comes up, if we are still on council, to kind of be more diligent and proactive about making the necessary changes for the contract.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hercules. I do have a couple questions, Attorney Lombardi, but I'll allow you to respond. It looked like you had wanted to respond.
No, I just wanted to say thank you to Councilwoman Hercules, and always happy to answer questions from any council person as they come.
Thank you. Thank you. So a quick question would be in regards to the bonuses regarding residency. Is my understanding, or I've been told, that when you apply to be a police officer, you can state you had a residence in Hartford, but that the day after you are hired, you can move.
That is true.
That is true.
Yes.
And so that wasn't addressed in this collective bargaining agreement, right?
And it couldn't be, Councilman LeBron. So that again is by virtue of state statute. Once the day they are hired, they become union members. So as soon as they are hired, we can no longer require Hartford residency, but we can require it of applicants at the time of application.
All right. So once they become a union member, then so we couldn't withhold their salary, their union dues for 2 days. All right. So next question. I guess that's I say that tongue in cheek. The second question is the history of where I think the major topic or the major, I believe, what folks want to talk about is around police accountability. Could you give us like a quick bullet point history 101, and if it's too long to do here, as to how we landed where we are now with our policies in regards to police accountability? Or is that too broad of a question?
Well, what I'll say is that not every, again, I might sound like a broken record because I think I said this on Monday, but not every measure that we as a city want to take to ensure police accountability requires negotiation. Okay. So, certainly there are provisions in this contract that deal with discipline, that deal with the due process afforded to officers after they have been issued discipline. But I couldn't give you the history on those because they predate me. And again, most of that due process is very typical of what we see with all of our bargaining units and all bargaining units across the state. But then there are things like the CPRB. There are things like the Police Accountability Review Board. There are things that we do as a city to put those accountability measures in place that don't require bargaining. So I don't have all the history to say, you know, how we got here today, but I can tell you that not everything requires bargaining with the union. And I think that even very recently with the council members that are here, the city's done great things to, you know, continue to work towards that transparency and accountability that the constituents want to see. And the police department has responded in kind, you know. So I think if that answers your question, or if you have follow up, I'm happy to try.
No,
and
it's fine.
more precisely.
Thank you, Attorney Lombardi. I think it's fine. I think it's just a general understanding of, you know, how have we landed on this, and how has, thought processes progressed to where we are now. But thank you for that. Last question would be, in comparison to, let's say, you know, other police contracts in the greater Hartford area or in Connecticut, in terms of police accountability, are we conservative? If we put it on the spectrum, are we more conservative? Are we right in the middle? We're more moderate, more progressive? Where are we in terms of police accountability, in your opinion?
If we're talking about the collective bargaining agreement, I'm not familiar with other PD's, you know, specific code of conduct, how much discipline they mete out for different violations of that code of conduct. So I can't speak to that. You know, I do know that we, you know, as far as like our CPRB, we were one of the first in the state to have one. I think right now we may be the only one in the state to have an inspector general. I mean, we're certainly ahead of the curve when it comes to that. But the CBA, I can't speak intelligently about what others do specific to discipline. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you there.
In general, so last question. Sorry about the background noise. Last question. In general, when it comes to these things as part of the bargaining tool, and let's take this police contract out, right? Let's just say the city is bargaining with said CBU, right? Collective Bargaining Unit, right? Is that how it's called?
Sure.
Do we take, in that process, do we look at other contracts in other municipalities as a basis of how we want to enter? Is that at all a given in terms of beginning the contract negotiations?
We certainly do look at comps, internal, meaning other unions within the city, as well as external, you know, other unions, like unions in other municipalities, when determining what our proposal should be and what our final stand should be. Because keep in mind, if we don't come to an agreement between the parties, we're forced into arbitration where an agreement is handed to us and it's beyond both of our control. So we do have to think about what is likely to be awarded in arbitration if we get that far. And arbitrators do look at comps to help guide their analysis. So it certainly helps guide ours throughout the negotiation process. It is not necessarily a starting or an ending point, because all other CBAs also are wide ranging as far as their GWIs or various provisions of the contract, but they are certainly informative.
Thank you very much, Attorney Lombardi, and I appreciate your time with this. I believe this resolution doesn't require a vote. We just receive it. You've answered it. I don't think we need to send it back with a vote. But you're also our corporation council member for the group, so I'll defer to you. Do we need to send it back?
I don't know if you want to. I mean, eventually council will have to do something. I guess it can die in committee if you don't send it out, or you can vote on it, I don't know, unfavorably to send it back so that it doesn't get passed. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's because the resolution required, you know, for you to answer questions, and you did that. So I guess maybe we should entertain a motion to send it back favorably. Does
send
that
it-
make sense?
I certainly don't want to, persuade a vote one way or the other among the council members. I'll just say, sending it back favorably would imply to council that you want that resolution passed. I
Which-
don't
Which
know
we
if,
did, and you did it already. I'm
Yeah,
trying to.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. If you can help me, Councilman Gale, with this quagmire.
Well, I
Maybe
don't
it's
know
in
if
my
I'm,
mind only.
I don't know if I'm going to be very helpful, but you bring up a very interesting dilemma that council faces, and maybe we should just leave this here for a minute, and maybe Attorney Lombardi can come back to us at another meeting with some thoughts about it, because it is the case that council does pass these resolutions, or I shouldn't say pass them. We propose a resolution that gets on the agenda that asks the administration for certain information. It then goes to committee, and often we get the information at committee before we've even passed the resolution. So tonight is a perfect example. Resolution was submitted. It hasn't been passed. The administration doesn't have to do anything. And yet the administration has come to committee and provided us with all of the answers. So Attorney Lombardi, perhaps you could give some thought to our process and procedures as a council when we're seeking information from the administration. How do we appropriately seek the information and then terminate, if you will, the process?
yeah, I will certainly take a look at that and give you all legal opinion at the following meeting, what to do once a situation like this arises as it has here, that the full council doesn't need to vote on a resolution because essentially its terms have already been carried out. I will just say this, though. I work at City Hall full time, and when I saw this resolution go up before council, I thought I'm always here, and they can always ask me these questions, and I'm happy to answer them. So I only offer that because, at least speaking for Howard, myself, and my office, so I'm sure I'm really speaking for every department. If there's information that council wants, you don't need to do more than just reach out to us and ask, and we're happy to appear at a committee meeting or get you answers or have a phone conversation. So I'll just leave that here for the future, but I will certainly come prepared next time with a recommendation as to how to treat this type of resolution, or in this one specifically.
And I think I'm an answer for Councilwoman Hercules. Maybe, hopefully I'm not answering for you, excuse me. Maybe we're aligned with everyone here. I think what has happened, Attorney Lombardi, is that, and this is a good thing, I think more of our constituents are looking to our committees, are looking at social media and looking to HPA-TV site, shout out to HPA-TV and all of their things. And I think that level of transparency is what folks like to see. That's often a comment that I receive, and it also allows me, if someone reaches out to me saying, hey, I had this question about this, I can refer them to these meetings. And so the more eyeballs and the more things people can see for themselves, that may not necessarily come through an email or just a direct question to you outside of these meetings, is very helpful. It's a helpful tool, at least for me. But Councilwoman Hercules, I saw your hand up. I don't know if you were going to chime in on that.
Yeah, I think part and parcel was the community desire to have some of these questions answered, where it wouldn't be, you and I, or you and Councilman Mixum, behind closed doors, not in the sense of being like, anything insidious, but to have it in a more public forum where people can get the insight. So that was the rationale behind putting it down as a resolution.
And this is a question that I can probably answer myself by looking more closely at the council rules, but maybe you all know off the top of your head. I mean, is your agenda really limited to items that are referred to you, or could you have, placed an item on the agenda to the effect of, visit from Deputy Corporation Counsel Lombardi to answer questions on the police contract, just because then we're not in this conundrum of procedure, right, having had a resolution referred that now we need to figure out what to do with.
I think that's a great point. So yes, we can just place an item on the agenda to do that. And I think that maybe that could be the recourse that we can utilize in the future. So yes, I think you're right in order to avoid this conundrum, and not saying that this is unique. This has happened before.
Sure.
But Councilman Gale, you had a comment or?
No, Chair, I think you answered it. You answered Attorney Lombardi's question. We do have reports routinely from administration. Interestingly, though, and maybe you can speak to this when you get back to us, as to how to Councilwoman Hercules' point and Councilman LeBron's point, getting it on an agenda so people know that the conversation's coming can be important in terms of letting our constituents know that, oh, you're asking these questions, and here they are. It's going to come before this committee on this night, so you have some advance notice, which is what a resolution does. It gets the community knowing, oh, council's thinking about this, and it's going to be at a committee meeting rather. So.
No, and I agree with you, Councilman Gale, and to kind of elaborate it further is like this new normal that we're encountering, right? Like this ability to, do it via Zoom, have it taped, have it done live, have it done through social media pages, on top of potentially hybrid situations where we're in person, just gives us a broader audience and a broader opportunities for folks to have access to information. So with that being said, that was the only agenda item. I don't see any other comments from my council colleagues. So motion to adjourn.
You got it.
All right, you got it. So moved. All right, bye everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.